Okay, I'm gonna go ahead and get started on this video. In this video, I want to go over just some summer sermon delivery points. In the book, the chapter "Making the Dry Bones Live" discusses some of these and just different ways to make the sermon clear and make it plain. It talks about illustrations showing us what it looks like in real life, explanation explaining what that means. Don't just assume that the congregation understands. Explain. Application, how does that apply? It should be practical. Every sermon should be practical. And then he talks about voice and pace and restatement. Don't speak too fast. Take your time. Clarity is more important than speed. And restatement. They didn't get it the first time. Sometimes you have to say the same thing again. The transition in between points. The overall, which helps the overall flow, should be good. Body language, eye contact, all of that is part of communication, voice, and then the introduction and the conclusion. Both of those are important. Does the introduction grab the attention and introduce the text, and what are they going to take away for that from that sermon? Just some other points from making the dry bones live. The reason why he uses the analogy of dry bones, the structure and the outline is like a skeleton. Remember, H.B. Charles used the terms the skeleton. Um, that is you need a skeleton. You can't hang meat on unless you have a skeleton to hang it on. But then you want to make the dry bones live. You want to add meat to it, illustrations, restatement, explanation, quotes, factual information. Narratives are good. Give a short narrative story. Um, to explain that the reason why narratives are so good is because they give the person a mental break in the context of listening to the Bible being taught. A story that drives home that point is always a good choice. And then basic illustrations like analogies. To be able to come up with those take time and thought in the sermon preparation in your study closet as you're studying and trying to find the best way to make the point. It takes time to come up with illustrations. And so I want to give some examples. One from Martin Luther King. He's preaching a sermon on, and he uses a if faith and a though faith. And he compares Jacob and Job. And Tony Evans uses the the example of the Leaning Tower of Pisa to make a point in his sermon. And so I want to start with Martin Luther King. He begins this right around the 10-minute and 20-second mark of the sermon. Now he's preaching a sermon called "But If Not" from Daniel chapter 3, verses 16 through 18. This is the passage about the three Hebrew boys who were getting ready to be thrown into the fiery furnace. And what they said before they were thrown in was, God is able to deliver us, but if not, but if he does not deliver us. And so that is the key point that Martin Luther King is making, that they had a though faith, but if not is the title of his message. So I want to just play this little illustration that he gives comparing Jacob and Job.
Able to deliver us, but if not. This simply means, my friends, that the ultimate test of one's faith is his ability to say, but if not. You see, there is what you may call an if faith, and there is a though faith. And the permanent faith, the lasting, the powerful faith is the though faith. Now the if faith says if all goes well, if life is hopeful, prosperous and happy, if I don't have to go to jail, if I don't have to face the agonies and burdens of life, if I'm not ever called bad names because of taking a stand that I feel that I must take, if none of these things happen, then I'll have faith in God. Then I'll be all right. That's the if faith. You know, a lot of people have the if faith. Jacob found himself in that dilemma once, and his faith was contingent on an if. And he said, now, if God will be with me, and if he will keep me in this way that I go, and if God will give me bread to eat and raiment to put on, that I come again to my Father's house in peace, then shall the Lord be my God. That's the if faith. Jacob hadn't quite gotten to the essence of religion. There is a though faith, though. And the though faith says, though things go wrong, though evil is temporarily triumphant, though sickness comes and the cross looms, nevertheless, I'm going to believe anyway, and I'm going to have faith anyway. Though the waters thereof roar and be troubled, though the mountains shake with the swelling thereof, the Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our refuge. And old Job got to that point, and he had a though faith. He looked out, and everything that he had been taken away from him. And even his wife said to him, now, what you ought to do, Brother Job, is to curse God and die. God has been unkind to you. You should have let God know a long time ago that you would only follow him if he allowed you to stay rich. If he allowed your cattle to stay in place, you ought to curse him and die, Job, because he hadn't treated you right. But Job said, honey, I'm sorry, but my faith is deeper than that. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. My faith is a though faith.
Very clear, very powerful explanation slash illustration to bring home the but if the sermon. But if not, if God doesn't do it, then he's I still have faith in him. And so he uses a contrast between Jacob and Job. Jacob, when he was on his way back, he knew he had to face Esau. He said, you know, if God does this, if God does that, and if God does that, if he gives me clothes, if he gives me food, then he will be my God. And he compares that to Job, who Job says, though he slay me, though all of my things have been taken away, I still will have faith in God. And so he put that, he uses that as an illustration to make his point. So I wanted to also look at the same sermon that we looked at before. We looked at the introduction last time, but also he gives a very good illustration talking about the two men who built the house, one who built it on the rock and one who built it on the sand. And he uses the Leaning Tower of Pisa as an illustration point. So I want to start that right around the time that he gives that illustration.
On sand, you can't go too fast on rock. This difference between the two men is fundamentally rooted in the fact that the second man, the foolish man, was fundamentally building a house for show. The man building his house on a rock was building a house to last. The second man was not concerned about how long the house would be there. He just wanted to make sure for however long it was there, people would want to drive by and look at it. It was for public persona, not for depth. I went to the Leaning Tower of Pisa a couple of summers ago when I was in Italy. If you're ever in Italy, don't bother going to Pisa. That had to be the biggest disappointment of my trip. Hollywood and I'll show you tourist attractions. Homes with families who are tourist attractions, ministries where people will come for the show. But when it comes to erecting something that will last, it's only good for tours.
And so he takes his time. Notice that that whole story took about 4 minutes. Took about 4 minutes to give that illustration. Had to take his time and tell the story, but the point that he made was clear, and you can see how that applies to the sermon point that he's making between the person that built their house on the rock by listening to Jesus and the person who built their house on sand by not listening to Jesus, without doing what he said. And he gives this illustration that if you don't take the time and build your life right, you're building something just for show. And he gives a very poignant and powerful illustration to make that point. Just some miscellaneous things as I wrap this up. As you go through life um, and you experience different things, one of the things they say to do is to keep an illustration library that could be used to bring to life various sermon points. Excel spreadsheet works well. A physical notebook works well. And you keep you know a library of the sermon points that you can incorporate into different sermons. I use an Excel spreadsheet. And then keep a refrigerator of passages that you have studied in your private devotion that can be developed into a sermon. The Bible does not have an expiration date. Something gained in devotion a year ago can still be preached today. A fresh word does not mean you got it yesterday. I know people talk like, God just gave me this. I needed a fresh word. A preacher ought to always have a word in them because they spend time in the word. That is how you get expository sermons, because you're always studying. You're always spending time in the word, and you have a notebook of things that you can develop into a sermon, and use illustrations and life um, experience to bring those to life, to make the sermon clear, because you're already applying it to your life, and so it's easy to develop a sermon from your private devotion. So I go ahead and end this video there.